Ladies and gentlemen, there are two kinds of stories. The kind of story you can take to bed with you, and then there are the other kind. And these stories tonight, ladies and gentlemen, these are the other kind. Welcome to Couchbound Yetis.
Salutations from the Nerdy Nation, everybody. It is Couchbound Yetis. I am, of course, Matt, aka the Godless Iowan, and the mother to my Norman Bates is beside me here, and that is Trey,
Hello.
aka.
I don't have an AKA, Matthew.
All right, so
I am the master of the macabre, and I'll tickle your fancy.
and we are, of course, very big horror fans. I have to tell you, though, growing up, if I heard the Hitchcock theme come on the TV, I shit myself. And it was mean because you had Nickelodeon, like right up to I think it was like 8 o'clock at night, and it would be like you just watched all that or something. You're like, oh, fun show, yeah. Oh my God, turn off the TV.
Oh boy, I sure love Doug. Oh no!
So what are we talking about today, Trey?
We are going to talk about two things, Matthew. We're going to talk about urban legends. I guess our favorite urban legends. I'm going to talk about my favorite urban legends. And we're going to talk about some of our favorite horror authors.
Right. But first, of course, let me get my screen up here. We have to talk about nerd ass shit.
Nerd ass shit!
I think the last several weeks, yes, I just burped.
Gross.
I've let you go first on nerd ass shit, but I think I'm gonna go first this time.
Go right ahead, man.
Okay, so my nerd ass shit is the video game that you see on the screen right now. It is called Hothead. It is fantastic. I recommend this game. I think it's $5 on Steam right now. And one thing that's really cool about this is the artwork that you see on the screen was made by the guy in the other corner over there. And the game was made by one of our high school friends. And so I am promoting this video game not only because it's a great game, but because I never gave him back his Game Shark for the N64.
You asshole.
And so I am using this as my payback for not giving him back his Game Shark. So I'm sorry, Sean, I didn't give you back your Game Shark, but I'm promoting your game right now, and it's actually fantastic. If you like games that are like Mario or Mega Man, or to me, it feels kind of like Kirby's Dream Land when I play it. If you like those games from the NES days, you will absolutely love this game. It's fantastic. So that is my nerd ass shit for this week. So Trey, what is your nerd ass shit?
Well, speaking of old-fashioned platformers, fucking Mega Man 11 dropped on October 2nd, and I've beat it 6 times because I fucking love that game. It's amazing. I assume the picture's up now.
The picture is up.
Okay.
I actually worked really hard on this episode and have all of the images ready just to pull up and toss up there. We're not going to have any issue whatsoever getting these these images up.
Wonderful.
Except for I just pulled your image down, which I didn't want to. So what makes Mega Man 11 great? What makes it better than Mega Man 1 through 10?
Well, I wouldn't say it's better than Mega Man 1 through 10, but I would say it is a very solid entry into the franchise. It's the first Mega Man game in 8 years. And it looks beautiful. It has a wonderful, like, hand drawn aesthetic to it. A lot of the effects animations are actually hand drawn, like the explosions and Mega Man's little laser blasts. And it's got fun, bright colors. The characters are fun. It's got these neat little cutscenes where we learn about Dr. Wily, the bad guy scientist, and Dr. Light, the good guy scientist, and how they used to be colleagues. And it's just great. It's a fantastic return for Mega Man. This year is actually the 30th anniversary of Mega Man, and I hope it sells well enough that they make some more. I hope I don't have to wait another 8 years for another Mega Man.
Yes, that would be good. I still can't beat the original Mega Man, so
You should try this one. It has like 5 different difficulty levels, and I've beat it once on each, and then some.
do you get something for beating it at the different levels?
I mean, the challenge is different. You don't get any like reward or anything, but you unlock more abilities. Like there's a shop where you can buy shit to like make your Mega Buster a little more powerful and stuff like that. I'm really hoping like within the next year they'll add some DLC. Like you get to play as Proto Man, Mega Man's older brother,
Yeah.
or Base. That would be cool. But yeah, it's fantastic. I absolutely love it, and I've been playing the shit out of it since I bought it. So,
Well, that sounds good. I'm guessing that Mega Man 11 is a little more expensive than $5. So
yeah, it's 30. It's about $30.
if you
Not too
have
bad.
if you have $30,
If you have 35, get both.
yes, get both. You will not be disappointed. I promise you that.
Yep.
And I am, of course, getting some really manly Tums because we ate not long before this. So, to transition to the horror aspects of this, I think that we should discuss probably our favorite, one of our favorite authors of all time, which was on both of our lists.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm, of course, talking about H.P. Lovecraft.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't you say a little bit while I take my Tums, and
Okay.
we'll enjoy that.
Well, first of all, I really want to recommend a YouTube video for anybody who's interested in H.P. Lovecraft, who likes H.P. Lovecraft, by a YouTuber named H Bomber Guy. It was a pretty popular video. I can't actually remember the title. I think it's like Lovecraft in the 21st Century or something like that. He does a fantastic video essay, about how he likes H.P. Lovecraft, and he deals with all of the baggage that goes with that because H.P. Lovecraft was such a controversial person. He was just incredibly racist, and like above and beyond what was like forgivable for the time. He was
Yeah, he wasn't exactly a great person.
no, he wasn't. He was a douche, but he had some fantastic writings. And I first heard of Uncle Howie in I think I was in the 8th grade, and my stepfather at the time had been reading this big old omnibus. When I think about it, it has like the most un-Lovecraft cover ever because H.P. Lovecraft wasn't big yet. Like he hadn't made that big triumphant leap into pop culture that happened around the 2000s. So it had like a ghoul. I had to assume it was like from Pickman's Model. It was just like a big leaping monster, like a humanoid monster. And like nowadays, if you publish anything by Lovecraft, you're going to have Cthulhu right on the cover of it, because he is, of course, to anyone who does, the creator of Cthulhu and what's been called the Cthulhu mythos, and he created such fictional grimoires as the Necronomicon. And a lot of his ideas have been very pervasive to other horror authors. They've been very influential to horror authors and filmmakers and artists because they're cool ideas. He has great ideas. But anyway, yeah, my stepfather had this big omnibus, And I think the first story I read was The Dreams in the Witch House. And it was so weird. And it just, if you've read it, there's like a rat with a man's face, and there's an evil witch who travels through dimensions, and the elder things pop up in there, and there's triangles and geometric shapes that are alive, and all kinds of bizarre, weird shit. And it just blew my fucking mind. And then I think the next story I read was The Color Out of Space, and it legitimately scared the shit out of me. I was like 14 or 15 years old, and it has some genuinely horrific things. It was a very early use of body horror. By early, I mean like it was like from the 1930s. I'm not sure when he wrote Color Out of Space.
Well,
But,
not to interrupt you, but I would like to point out that we have Mommy Baldwin in the chat today.
Hi, Mommy. I love you.
Mommy
Hi,
Baldwin
Mom.
is in the chat, so
I love my mom. Hi, Mom.
Trey loves his mommy. Trey loves his mommy. Trey loves his mommy. Okay, anyway. To get back to Lovecraft, I was going to say, see, my introduction to Lovecraft started because I was sitting in a study hall and I was reading a book by R.L. Stine. And this pretentious kid that sat beside me was like, if you like that, that's not horror, that's just junk. And he goes, you ought to check out H.P. Lovecraft. And if you haven't guessed by now, the pretentious kid who was talking about R.L. Stine being drivel was the guy over there, Mr. Trey Baldwin.
Really?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Yes. I was, I want to say I was in the 10th grade, 9th grade. I don't know, somewhere around
I had
there.
to have been older than 9th. Because
Probably 10th grade.
Yeah, I was at least 1 year below you.
Yes, you were. But anyway, Lovecraft, fell in love with it. I've got Cthulhu on the screen as well.
Is that the Bob Eggleton picture?
Yes.
Bob Eggleton is a fantastic artist, and that was like he did that like I think in the 80s or 70s, and it's a real popular picture. I love it. Sorry, go ahead.
And your mother agrees R.L. Stine is drivel.
Oh,
so
damn.
Anyway,
take that, R.L. Stine.
I would say that, and I believe that Artemis Brain Sample, one of my friends, might be hitting on your mother right now in the chat. Just saying.
That's
but
cool. I don't know how to feel about that. It's okay.
Anyway, when it comes to Lovecraft, like, I do not enjoy short stories all that much.
Really?
I have a very hard time getting into short stories. And so when you recommended Lovecraft and I started reading through it, the thing is, he is so good at, in just a short matter of words, making an environment and an atmosphere that's just horrific.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I've loved H.P. Lovecraft since that time. I know that Mrs. Snarky also loves H.P. Lovecraft. And if your only understanding of Cthulhu comes from a Metallica song, you need to check it out. Check out H.P. Lovecraft. I actually got in trouble at school because I printed out every story that H.P. Lovecraft had written.
I did too. I didn't have an actual book except for that one for like years.
Yeah,
I printed them off in home ec.
I know and I went into the computer lab of a morning and I would be like stealthy about it. I would print off one or two stories, then I would take them to my locker, then I'd head back to the computer lab and print out another couple. And so that was my book. Now you can get the entire H.P. Lovecraft what's the word? Compilation. And you can get it for like $2 on Kindle.
You can get it free on Kindle.
Yeah, you can get most of them free. I haven't.
You can read them all free online.
You can. But I mean, that would be nice.
you could support like different publishers. Like HP ain't getting no money for it because he's deader than toast and he's got no relatives, which is good. Because the one thing is that he shouldn't be rewarded for his behavior because he was such a racist piece of shit. But that's kind of like I don't know if that's necessarily like a get out of jail free card when you like H.P. Lovecraft because he's not getting rewarded for his terrible views.
No,
But
I like his views outside of his writings are just awful.
mhm.
But you don't really get that in his writings.
No, I mean, like some of it, sometimes you do. It's not quite as bad. I mean, he has a big thing about polluted bloodlines. And
Yeah.
that in and of itself is racist. But the thing that happens with his work, and this kind of is talked about in the video essay I recommended earlier by H. Bomber Guy, is it almost inadvertently becomes like in the stories you have these cults and these groups of outsiders who follow Cthulhu and the elder gods and all of these strange entities, and it almost becomes like it's a way of bringing people together who are outsiders and who are alienated, and that's not at all what he intended to do. He intended it to be horrific and to say, oh, these people are polluting their bloodlines because they're mating with fish people from underneath the sea and all this, but it accidentally becomes like a strange kind of outsider's tale. I'm not saying it very well, but it's an interesting topic. I would also recommend, I believe, the book publisher Tor. Their website had something called the Lovecraft Reread, in which a couple of lady authors go through all of his works and they kind of talk about which ones are their favorites, and they have some really good insights too.
Well, I was going to say, if you don't feel like getting into like reading Lovecraft, there's a lot of great Lovecraft movies as well, Lovecraftian movies, like Reanimator. I love Reanimator; is amazing.
The Mouth of Madness.
Mouth of Madness.
John Carpenter film.
There is a movie Rats that is based on the Rats in the Wall.
Really?
Yes, there is a movie. Maybe it's not called Rats.
I don't think it is because Rats is something else. Rats is an exploitation film.
I'd have to look it up.
There's a lot though. Just
are.
look up Lovecraft movies, and there's some that are shit, and there's some that are awesome.
Well, and Lovecraft
Castle
is
Freak. That's a good one.
Lovecraft is one of the reasons why I say that a certain horror movie I think is a lot better than other people think it is, and that's Cloverfield. I feel like it has a Lovecraft feel to it because you're not seeing the creatures right off. You know that the atmosphere is horrifying, especially the sequel, Cloverfield Lane. I can't remember what it was. Something Cloverfield Lane.
Yeah,
that was much more Lovecraftian. And your mom is pointing out The Mist was pretty good, and that does have a Lovecraft feel to it as well.
Yeah, Stephen King. Stephen King is very heavily influenced by Lovecraft.
Yes.
I mean, not only does he name drop Lovecraft all the time in his novels and short stories, but
he uses Arkham, doesn't he?
I don't know if Arkham appears in any of Stephen King stuff, but I know like the Tommyknockers is basically a reworking of The Color Out of Space.
Yeah,
and
it is.
There's just he's written like Salem's Lot. He wrote a prequel story called Jerusalem's Lot, and it has Yog-Sothoth mentioned in it, and there's like a giant worm that lives under a church. So, anyway.
There's a lot of good Lovecraftian fiction as well that's written. I don't remember what that book was called that you recommended to me that was just utter trash, but it was like...
I think I know what you're talking about.
McHumans, yeah.
Yeah, it was fun. It was dumb.
It's like comedy horror fiction.
Yeah.
It's so weird. But anyway.
There's a lot of really good Lovecraftian authors, modern day Lovecraftian authors. I should have prepared some, but I didn't even think about that.
Well, we have prepared our favorite Lovecraft stories.
Yeah.
So what one would you want to start with?
I think my very favorite would be The Shadow over Innsmouth.
Okay, and it's the one I didn't grab.
Cool. Good job,
So
buddy.
let me grab the shadow picture. And everybody that's watching, this is way more professional than we've ever been. So it's on the screen now, Trey.
We're basically CNN right now.
So what is Shadow over Innsmouth?
The Shadow over Innsmouth is a story about a young man in the 1920s who, like he's out rambling. I guess I don't quite remember why he goes to Innsmouth, but it seems like he's like sightseeing before he goes to college or after he goes to college or some shit. I might even be inferring some of that because my memory and my ability to recap things that I read is quite terrible. But he hears rumors about a town called Innsmouth, and the population is all rumored to be very. There's talk of devil worship happening in this town, and all of the residents of this town have what outsiders call the Innsmouth look. They all are very pale, and they have large, bulging eyes that almost never blink. And the older they get, the more strange they start to look. They go bald very early, and they get almost web fingers. So this guy decides to go and investigate, just see what's actually going on. And when he gets there, he does find that the residents of the town are very reluctant to have anything to do with outsiders. He catches a glimpse of what appears to be an evil clergyman in the basement of a church that's called the Esoteric Order of Dagon. And basically, I don't need to recount the whole fucking story.
No, you don't.
Because
Because I'm going to be way more brief in mine.
Okay, I'm sorry. But basically, he learns the history of this town. I mean, like a lot of people know it. I don't know if you want me to spoil it too much, but there's fish monsters, and it's really great.
Okay.
And it's one of my favorites. I'm actually currently illustrating a comic book adaptation of this story, written by veteran comic book writer Stephen Phillip Jones, who is an awesome guy. He's been writing comic books for a couple of decades now. And that's going to be coming out soon, hopefully. I'm over halfway done with the art, so I'm very much looking forward to that.
All right, and you just bored your mom because she's leaving.
Bye, Mom.
Now, the first on my list, one of my favorite stories of Lovecraft, is At the Mountains of Madness. And At the Mountains of Madness, I want to be as brief as possible, but it's a short story, and so it's hard to be brief and at the same time not spoil it. Basically, it is a trip into a mountainous region that's
Antarctica.
In Antarctica,
Mm-hmm.
and they find the ruins of an ancient civilization, and it's, how do I explain it without getting too deep?
I mean, it doesn't matter. Basically, like a group of like paleontologists and archaeologists discover the remnants of an ancient pre-human civilization.
And they worshipped the elders.
Yeah, well, they were basically they left behind like a whole bunch of murals and artwork and stuff like this, and then the protagonist of the story basically learns through the remains of this city that like there has been life on the planet, intelligent life on Earth from other places for millions of years, and that human beings may have been accidentally created. And this is actually a very influential story on a lot of your modern ancient astronaut people.
Yeah.
So there was one source. It's not Eric von Daniken, but it was a French author who wrote about ancient aliens, and he used Lovecraft as a fucking source, like a not fiction. He thought it wasn't fiction, and he wrote about it like it wasn't fiction. But yeah, the Mountains of Madness is great because it doesn't introduce, but it uses one of the things that I like most about Lovecraft, which is the idea of cosmic horror and humanity's measly place amongst a cold and uncaring universe.
And when the humans realize just how small and insignificant they are, they're driven basically to madness.
Right.
And it's wonderful. It's an amazing book, amazing short story. You should check it out. So Trey, your next one on your favorite Lovecraft is
Is it The Rats in the Walls?
Is it? Because that's the one that's up there.
Yes, because I don't remember. I can't see the picture, Matthew.
I know.
Yeah, The Rats in the Walls is a very good story. It's very well written, in spite of the name of the protagonist's cat. I'm not even going to say what it is. If you type in Lovecraft's cat, you'll find it. But it's The Rats in the Walls. It's not a Cthulhu story, but it deals with like tainted bloodlines, and it's a shorter story, so I don't want to go into it so much because it'll just ruin it. But it's got some fantastic imagery and cannibalism, and it's wonderful. I love it.
Oh, it is. It's a fantastic book. I absolutely love it.
It's one of Stephen King's favorite stories by Lovecraft too.
My absolute favorite Lovecraft story of all time is one that doesn't really get a lot of exposure. Really, it's The Beast in the Cave. Mm-hmm. And it's a very short story, but it's so good. Basically, what it is, yes, Mountains of Madness has Shoggoth in it. The Beast in the Cave, you have a guy that's gotten lost and trapped in a cave, and there is some kind of monster within this cave with him. He can't see it, he can hear it, he knows it's there. And if you've seen the movie... what is it? The Descent.
Yeah.
The Descent movies is based around this idea.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's so good. And the end, it's just like it hits you. And I don't want to give it away because it's the love of, like, outside of Mrs. Snarky and my family, this book is the love of my life. The Beast in the Cave. Outside of Mrs. Snark, like, she's above it, but The Beast in the Cave still, it holds such a pleasant place in my heart.
I better be above it.
You're above it. But anyway,
it's surprising to me that you like that one so much.
Oh,
It's one of his earlier stories, and it's very much more influenced by Poe. He went through a Poe phase. He was very much influenced by Poe.
But it's so good.
Yeah, it is. It's a good story.
It's such a fantastic story. Okay, so we are getting ready to go into our next portion of this. Do we want to do authors or do we want to do urban legends first?
Do you think, well, we're already talking about an author, so we just as well continue that. Are we going to have time to talk about everything? Are we going to go long?
We're going to have time. Yeah, we're going to have plenty of time.
All right.
Since you're in my back bedroom.
Oh, am I?
Yes.
Way to show how the sausage is made, Matt. God. Way to ruin the mystery. Jeez.
Pickman's Model is also another great Lovecraft story. Duke Bonanza is talking about it.
It almost has a dark sense of humor to it.
Yes.
There's a sense of humor to that story that I really enjoy. And that one also illustrates that Lovecraft very much felt like he himself was an outsider.
Yes.
Because he was very effeminate. He was kind of sickly as a kid. And I bet there was probably a good deal of self-loathing. I'm not going to say he was gay because there's like no evidence for that, but he was definitely homophobic. But like in Pickman's Model, Pickman is an artist. He's not the protagonist. The protagonist is Pickman's friend. And Pickman is an artist, and he paints all these ghastly, wonderful pictures of ghouls eating corpses and sitting around his families and shit. But anyway, you can really feel Lovecraft writing about himself, basically. It's almost kind of an autobiographical thing.
Yeah.
When he talks about Pickman and being an outsider. And, that was the thing. As a teenager, you can really relate to that kind of shit if you're a weirdo who reads H.P. Lovecraft.
Oh, definitely. So when it comes to the next author on your list, which one do you want to talk about first?
I'll talk about Clive Barker.
Okay, let me get that pulled up.
So,
all right, go ahead.
I discovered Clive Barker's written works also in high school, but I didn't read that much. In fact, I think the only thing that I read was The Hellbound Heart, which was the basis for the film that he wrote and directed, Hellraiser. And it was very good. See, Clive Barker, I like Stephen King too, and I easily could have brought up Stephen King, but everybody loves Stephen King. I didn't read Stephen King for a long time because I had this stupid gothy teenage attitude of, well, everybody liked him, so I'm not going to read it because it can't be good. But everybody likes Stephen King because he's a good fucking author. But something that I like more about Clive Barker than Stephen King. I like them both, but I really love Clive Barker's ability to describe things, and he's very visceral, and he uses images. He doesn't beat around the bush. He will tell you what the spooky thing looks like, and it doesn't ruin it because he does a really good job. Like oftentimes in horror, the horror itself is best portrayed like not directly. You can imply horror, and it does a whole lot to build atmosphere and bring you the creep factor. But Clive Barker has such a vivid imagination, and I think him being a visual artist also really, I don't know, it brings another dimension to his writing style. But he's very visceral. Like if you've seen Hellraiser, I don't know, his writing is like that. It's gross, it's grimy, it's bloody and greasy, but it's also eloquent and graceful, and I just love that guy.
Yeah.
Great.
So, what's some of your favorite Clive Barker books?
Okay, so he wrote a bunch of short stories that were published in the Books of Blood, and some of those were made into movies. Like Candyman comes from the Books of Blood, and Rawhead Rex. Rawhead Rex is a great story and a terrible movie. The story is fucking fantastic, and another thing is like he's very progressive. Like he is gay, and he writes gay characters, and he's just like not apologetic about it, and it's super awesome. And he'll have all kinds of homoerotic imagery in his fucking, like Rawhead Rex, the monster is described as like basically being a giant humanoid, like he represents a penis. He's got a big bulbous head, and he's gaping teeth, and he's like tall and and girthy. It's like he's meant to represent the toxic nature, like toxic masculinity, basically. When masculinity turns destructive, and that's what Rawhead Rex is. He's like an ancient pagan monster, and he gets destroyed by ancient feminine pagan like powers and shit. But it's a great story, and he's so good at describing weird shit. I'm terrible at talking about things.
I'm just going to admit, anyway. I have actually never read anything by Clive Barker.
Oh man, since you like novels, I would recommend to you Weave World is very good. It's actually a fantasy horror novel, but it has a contemporary setting, like it takes place when he wrote it, like in the 80s or 90s. It's very good, and just he has such imaginative characters. He has like this character who's like he's got a magic coat, and he's like a salesman, and he like opens his coat up, like a guy in 1970s New York gonna sell you a Rolex on the side of the road. But like when you look into the lining of his coat, you see what you want the most, and he'll give it to you. But it's like fake and rotten and awful, but you don't see it because you want it so much. Oh, and in Weave World, like there's these trio of like sisters, and they're like witches, but two of them are like dead. Like they were never born dead. They were like stillborn, but they like grew into adulthood with their sister. And one of them like will catch guys and like have sex with them and make these horrible monstrous babies, and they're like her minions. It's so great. He's so weird. He's actually such a weird guy.
It's really weird that I have never read anything by him, because I love movies with the Clive Barker name. Nightbreed and what's the other one? Isn't there a sequel to Nightbreed?
No, there's not. Hellraiser.
Okay, Hellraiser. Yeah, that's another one that's amazing.
Candyman.
And Candyman, yes. But those movies are just fantastic. So I'll have to check them out.
Nightbreed is a very good book. I believe it's called Cabal. Is the name of it?
Yeah, that's what Duke said in the.
Okay.
Is the book's title's Cabal equals Nightbreed.
It's so good.
So I'm going much more old school with my choices in the author realm, because my first choice is Edgar Allan Poe. I absolutely love Edgar Allan Poe's writings. I have all of his on my Kindle, and they're written with Edgar Allan Poe or Lovecraft. No matter how old they get, their stories are still chilling, and they still get right to the grit and to the gory nature of the tale. A lot of people like Mary Shelley when it comes to Frankenstein, or she has another book called The Last Man on Earth. Her books are so long that I find myself bored as I read them. And I realize she's one of the very first horror authors.
Right.
But they just don't keep my interest like Poe or Lovecraft do. So I absolutely love Edgar Allan Poe. I think the Raven is one of the most fantastic pieces of poetry ever written. And I will swear to my dying day, Tiny Toons Adventures, The Raven, was the greatest portrayal of that on the screen.
I have to disagree and say Simpsons Treehouse of Horror.
They did a good job, yes. Oh, so...
In fact, I almost can't read The Raven without thinking of James Earl Jones's voice because he narrated it on The Simpsons.
That's pretty funny.
It's sad.
It's kind of...
It's kind of sad. It's
not,
okay to say it. It's sad.
It's
really
little sad, but I mean, it's not horribly sad, but it's not a great thing.
No, the night's still young, Matthew. Give it time.
Okay, so your next tale or your next author tale that you're wanting to discuss. What is it?
Yeah, his name. I forgot his name. His name is so hard for me. I have to look it up every time. The first book of his I read was We Live Inside You. I believe that's the picture. It's is it Jeremy Robert Johnson?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. He is part of a literature movement, a relatively recent literature movement called the Bizarro literature movement, and it's fucking rad. Bizarro books they're like surreal, and they're almost like trauma movies in a book form. They talk about weird shit and gross shit and grotesque things and sometimes beautiful things. But it's all very much like an offshoot of the surrealist movement. And he was one of the first Bizarro authors that I had read. Also an author named Anderson Prunty. Jeremy Robert Johnson. God, his name is so fucking hard for me. I don't know why. It's like it's in another language and I can't remember it every time. But like We Live Inside You is a collection of short stories. And like the story I believe that the book is named from is about this man who goes jogging and like a swarm of very small insect-like creatures fly into his mouth. And it's like I'm pretty sure in that whole book there's a lot of body horror and like invasive parasite themed stories. And like what's great about his writing is that he can get super gross, but he's just crafts his words and his settings so lovingly. And it's like, and it's also, it feels modern without being like pandering. Like most of his stories have a contemporary setting, but they don't feel like the kids aren't saying, "Oh, that's whack, yo." You can tell that he is a younger author, but he doesn't sound like an old man trying to be cool. And he writes gross things, and he writes tragic things. Like one of his short stories is about a little boy who's deaf, and he wakes up and like there's nobody around, and like he lives in the basement. And he's actually initially awoken because he feels like a kind of a seismic tremor. Basically, like the apocalypse happened while he was sleeping, and he wakes up, and like everybody's who was outside, he sees their shadows blasted onto the wall, like in Hiroshima. And it's like it's heartbreaking, but it's like from the perspective of this little kid who's just like, "Oh, gee, what's going on?" And everybody's fucking dead, and it's just great.
That's fantastic.
Oh, it is fantastic. He's a wonderful author. He also wrote a book called Angel Dust Apocalypse, which has great short stories in it.
Okay, so with my next one, and it's I'm thinking that Duke might be a psychic in the chat because the next choice for me is Harlan Ellison. I have no mouth and I must scream.
Fuck yeah. I love Harlan Ellison.
Not only is this a fantastic horror tale, but this also, to add in the geek, it's the very first video game that was truly horrific, that would really scare you.
Yeah.
So I don't... Basically, if... God, I'm so bad at summarizing things. Trey is so much better at summarizing these stories. Go ahead and give a brief summary.
Basically, I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream is a post-apocalyptic story. A supercomputer has taken over the world and has basically caused the extinction of mankind, with the exception of a group of, I believe, 5 people. I think it's implying that they were scientists in a former life, but basically this computer... what's the computer's name? Am. The computer's name is Am. It's like... the computer itself like covers the entire globe, and it's like its guts and its electronic innards have made like this giant complex, like a huge world-spanning cavern, and the computer is keeping this group of 5 people alive forever. He's made them immortal basically, and he's almost has godlike powers. He can transform their bodies and he can make them hallucinate. And he's basically keeping them alive because he just fucking hates humanity so much. So these 5 people are trapped in an eternal hell because of this computer that humans have made. And the whole story revolves around their plight and the awful things that Am does to them. And it's so good. It's a great choice. I'm glad you picked it because it's awesome.
I do. I love that book. So I actually have one more to share here. So I kind of cheated because I have 3 novels to share.
I clearly don't know when to shut up anyway, so go ahead.
My third is The Turn of the Screw by Henry James. Once again, this is one of the very early horror novels, and this one is chilling. Basically, it's told from these 2 people come together and they're reading this tale of a woman who moved to a house to be the nanny of these 2 children, and then things just start going awfully wrong. It's a ghost story. It's a horrific tale. It's one that you can. Like, I actually have to, like, when I'm reading this story, I have to stop every now and then because it starts giving me the heebie-jeebies. It's one of those things where it's talking about things glimpsed out of the corner of your eye, and so as you're reading it, if you see a shadow, you're like, oh, fuck, no.
Oh, it's over.
It's over. We're going to die. But it's a fantastic tale. I think you can get this one for free on Amazon for your Kindle, and the book itself I think you can get for like 99 cents.
Nice.
If you want the paperback version.
Mm-hmm.
But those are our authors. So now we are moving into the what?
Urban legends, y'all.
Yes, urban legends. And there's so many urban legends out there that it's really, really hard to just pick out a few. But I'm gonna let Trey go first.
Okay.
Do you want the little ones or the flying one?
Flying one.
Okay, so let me get that drawn up. Okay.
That picture, bitch.
So the picture's up now. You go right ahead.
This is a drawing. I believe it's made by an eyewitness of the Mothman of Point Pleasant, West Virginia. This was a creature. See, my urban legends that I'm going to be talking about are all well, they're both. I'm going to talk about 2, but they're both like UFO related because I love UFOs and like UFO stories and things. It's a pet hobby of mine. I'm very interested in. But the Mothman is a very strange little story. I don't know what the hell happened for 13 months in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. There was almost certainly a tremendous amount of hysteria. People were seeing flying saucers, and people were claiming to have been abducted or talking to men from outer space. There's a book that's quite famous by a man named John Keel called The Mothman Prophecies. But basically, for 13 months, people in this small town in West Virginia were seeing, on top of random strangers in town and unidentified flying objects, they were seeing this creature that the press gave the name Mothman to. They erroneously gave it that name because I guess they thought that was a villain from the Batman TV series with Adam West at the time.
Okay.
There is no Mothman in the Adam West TV series. I don't know what the fuck they're doing, but you can just make shit up in the 60s, I guess, or anytime, really. But Mothman was what it was dubbed by the press, even though no witness ever described it as looking anything like a moth. The witnesses, I have a book here. This is a fantastic book. It's called The Unexplained by Jerome Clark. He's a great author because he's not sensationalist, and he takes a pretty skeptic bent. He just presents the facts of like what happened or what people claim to have happened, and he doesn't really make a comment either way. And I appreciate that about him. But basically, you have like teenagers, like Roger Scarberry. He was a dude. He was like in a truck, or not in a truck, but like in a car. They were out necking, him and his girlfriend. And like they saw this creature. They said it was very large, kind of humanoid in shape, but it didn't appear to have a head. You know, like the picture that's on screen. And it had very large wings, and it kind of took off into the air without flapping. And like they describe this thing behaving in absurd ways that are not physically possible. But it's just very strange because a lot of people during this 13-month period described a very similar creature. It didn't ever really appear to want to hurt anybody. It didn't ever swoop down and snatch up somebody's baby or any shit like that. It mostly just kind of stood there and awkwardly stared at people and made them feel very, very afraid for no apparent reason. And I have no idea what the fuck happened.
The urban legend, supposedly, if you see Mothman, then someone close to you is going to die.
Yeah. The legend that grew up around the Mothman was that it was like some kind of portent of doom because at the end of that 13-month period, in December of 1967, the Silver Bridge collapsed in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. And so then, like, people like John Keel and author Gray Barker, they kind of just then said, oh, that's what the whole Mothman thing was about. He was trying to warn us or whatever.
Yeah.
The Mothman Prophecies is a great book. If you, like, you can't read it as nonfiction, even though it's nonfiction, because John Keel is not the best at being impartial when he reports things. He makes very grand, sweeping statements. And like John Keel himself is something I could go on and on about because he was a super weird guy, and he actually is so funny. This ties in perfectly. He had this theory that there were entities that influenced mankind that he called ultra terrestrials, and they lived like outside of mankind's ability to comprehend, like they lived beyond our senses, and that they would use humanity for their own purposes. And that's a very Lovecraftian kind of idea, very much like how Lovecraft describes the old ones. But anyway, Mothman, super fun. I highly recommend, if anybody's interested in this kind of goofy shit, that you should read the Mothman Prophecies. It's a very fun and creepy book. I also recommend The Unexplained. This is a good book. I think it's still in print. Like this, I've had this for like probably almost 15 or 16 years.
Yeah.
I bought this myself at Barnes & Noble when I was a wee teenage lad.
That should tell you how long ago it was. He bought it at a real,
at a
physical
bookstore.
Barnes and Noble.
You see, boys and girls, you used to be able to walk into a store and buy a book.
I loved Barnes and Noble.
It's still there. There's one in
there's the Barnes and Nobles, but I mean, if I want a book now, I just buy it online.
Yeah. Remember Walden Books?
Yes. I
Yeah.
do.
Anyway, I'm
So
sorry.
I do want to mention my friend Wonder Lady Faye, who's in the chat, says she's going to be releasing short stories on her YouTube channel
Awesome.
that she's done. So that should be pretty cool. And then there's also mention of a Japanese urban legend about the toilet lady, which I don't want to know.
I do. That sounds great.
I have no interest in knowing about a toilet lady. I already have problems taking a shower because of Psycho.
Yes. I want to be sitting on a toilet and some creepy Ring-esque Japanese spook lady to come out of the toilet.
No.
What are you doing?
No.
I'm just taking a shit. I mean, whatever.
So anyway, my first story and the picture that I'm using is actually what I think explains the story the best. But it's not really the original imagery that you get about this creature. But my first one is Chupacabra.
Yeah.
And I really enjoy it. Now, the very first times that you heard about Chupacabra, or the very first tales, it's more of a reptilian-like creature.
Yeah, it's more humanoid. It's more like a gray.
Yes, it's more like a small alien reptilian. But then it over time became this more like a I don't like what I show in the picture. It's more of a canine-like creature, and it's explained to me like I don't know what to explain the reptilian stories about, but
I do.
I'll get to you. You've had your chance to talk enough for a little bit. So
I'm sorry.
Anyway, the canine is dogs get mange. They look horrible when they lose most of their hair. Other animals get mange, raccoons get mange, and they're horrific. So that's the only thing. Like, I could see maybe a raccoon with mange looking kind of like the reptilian-like creature. Because a raccoon with no hair, if it was in the dark and you saw it standing, it could look almost humanoid. But yeah, once a dog gets mange, it looks horrific and scary, and it looks like a beast that could kill you, but it's really just a sick dog.
Right.
And they probably, if they had mange and they were wild dogs, they're not going to be, the pack is probably left it behind. And so they're probably on their own. So they probably do attack whatever livestock they come across. And so that would explain the tales of them killing animals and stuff. But what was your explanation for the reptilian?
Okay, so basically, chupacabras as a phenomenon started in Puerto Rico in the 90s. And the first real widely published encounter was from a lady who said she saw this strange creature hopping across a road or some shit. And she had just seen the movie Species.
Okay.
Yes, it had been very much like a lot of reporters and investigators who had looked into this. Basically, this lady saw something, and because she had seen the movie Species, she kind of linked them together in her mind, regardless of what it was that she actually saw. But it very much influenced how she described it, and so that's why the chupacabra starts off as like a gray with spikes and more of like a monster, like a reptilian sort of alien appearance, and less like a dog. It became a dog slowly over time, which the chupacabra, it's like a really interesting cultural phenomenon.
Yeah.
Because it started in Puerto Rico, and then it moved to Central America and Mexico, and then into the United States. And that's part of that movement was part of its evolution, and from a alien to a dog. And it's very interesting. There's some really interesting reading material out there to anybody who wants to look into it.
It's a very interesting tale. It's very weird.
Yeah.
So speaking of weird, probably the weirdest thing that we're going to talk about tonight is your thing that's next up, and I'm queuing that up now, so it should be appearing right now. So go ahead.
All right. So this picture illustrates what has become known as the Kelly, Kentucky Goblin Invasion of the 1950s. Basically, this story revolves around one family's encounter of a night. I think it was in the summertime. The Sutton family is the name of these people. Yes, there were two families. The Taylors and the Suttons were staying in a very small house in the country. It was August 21st, 1955. So basically, earlier in the evening, one of the members of the household said that he had seen a falling star, and it had seemed like it landed in a gully or something nearby, and he found that interesting. And it may or may not even have anything to do with the rest of the story, but it's always reported as being part of it. So later that evening, the two families are sitting together, like in their living room. It's a very small country house. I believe it's a farmhouse, and they live on a farm. And one of them espies out the window a small man. They described it as a small humanoid figure. It was silvery in color. It seemed to have a faint glow to it. It was walking in a very stiff and robotic fashion, and it was just kind of approaching the house. And this completely freaked these people out. They were absolutely terrified. They began shooting at this creature and possibly one or two more. The illustration has several, and they describe there being several, but it seems also quite likely that there's only one or two. And they were very excited, and they were very scared. And they actually started shooting through their own windows at these entities that they were seeing outside the house. And at one point, I have a picture in this book depicting this. At one point, one of them stepped out onto the porch, and he claimed that a creature on the roof grabbed his hair. This story is really weird. And the weirdest thing about it is, like, these folks piled into a car and they drove straight to the police. And they brought the police back to their farmhouse with them. And the cops didn't see a goddamn thing. They saw all the holes in the windows where they had been shooting. There was evidence of that. There was evidence all over where shotguns had been fired, but they didn't see any creatures. They didn't see anything. And so after a couple hours, the cops said, "Look, there's nothing we can do because there's nothing here." And so the family was like, "Okay, fine. We're just going to go to bed." At this point, it was like 3 o'clock in the morning. So the two families go back into the house and they get settled down. And then the fucking creatures come back and they're poking their heads up and looking in the windows. And so the family is terrorized until basically about 6 o'clock the following morning. It's a strange story. There have been theories suggested to what happened. I think the most prominent skeptic theory is that they saw a couple of great horned owls. That doesn't match in any way how the witnesses describe the entities. And I'm not saying that it isn't the explanation, but it's not a very convincing one to me.
Oh, but when you're scared, I mean, if you're already scared, then your imaginations can work together.
Right. It can definitely, your imagination can definitely work against you if you are scared. But it's a very strange little story, and I don't know what actually happened, but it's so fun for me to think about because these people were genuinely afraid, and their stories corroborated together for the most part. They all told the same thing. They were all interviewed separately, and there was composite sketches made of the creatures that they, claimed to have seen. So it's very weird. It's one of my favorite UFO stories, even though there isn't technically a UFO involved. There's just these weird little glowing goblins with big round eyes. And the funny thing is, the creatures never actually tried to hurt them. They just were kind of approaching in an almost curious way from how they described it. But by their own admission, they just didn't give a shit and they started shooting at them with fucking shotguns, whatever they were.
Is it possible that hallucinogenics were at play in this?
I don't know, maybe. I don't know. This is before acid became a thing.
Well, but there were mushrooms, and
I guess. I mean, but none of the witnesses claim to have eaten any mushrooms.
Yeah, it seems really weird. So my next urban legend, the last one that we'll talk about tonight, is a newer one. There have been some tales of this since the 1950s, but it really grew to prominence in the late 1990s, and that is the Black-Eyed Children.
Yeah.
This thing to me is just horrifying. It's I don't know. Kids are creepy by themselves a lot of times. Kids just have a way of being creepy. And so if you saw a child and they were alone at night, you might be like, oh, hey, I should help this child. And you walk up to them and they turn around and they have black eyes, and or they come up to your door and knock, and then you open the door and there's these two black-eyed children they're asking to come inside. It's horrifying. It's just scary. It's just one of those tales that it's so good. I mean, I know that there's no actual evidence of any of this, nor any of the other things that we've talked about. I mean, maybe your story has physical evidence where they were shooting the windows out, but there's no proof of any of this stuff happening. No. But it's so creepy. I don't know. It's just, and like I said, with the advent of the internet, and this was even pre-YouTube, there were all kinds of videos online about black-eyed children, and, you know, it was a more innocent time. And if you saw something online that looked like a real video, you kind of went, oh, crap, this is a real video. This is actually something that happened. I don't think that there are people out there that could do TV magic on their own. So, you know, you took these things, and it's so creepy and so weird. But, yeah, Black-Eyed Children. There's been a movie made about Black-Eyed Children.
There's a band called Black-Eyed Peas.
There's a band called Black-Eyed Peas, but that has nothing to do with Black-Eyed Children.
Yes, it does.
That was the worst joke said tonight.
It's my headcanon. It's my headcanon that Black-Eyed Peas is really about Black-Eyed Children.
There was nothing good about that joke there. I'm just saying.
Yes, there was. It was great. I love it.
No, there was nothing good at all about that. So
okay.
Those are our urban legends. Now, there's been a couple mentioned in the chat. New Jersey Devil. Or the Jersey Devil.
Pretty fun. Yeah.
I don't know much about the Jersey Devil, other than it's kind of along the lines of the Mothman, but it's just been around longer.
Yeah, it's a lot older, and like it has a very folklore kind of background. It's also called the Leeds Devil, and like the history of it is like a lady in like the 1700s was giving birth to like her 13th kid, and she didn't want it, and she's like, if I have to have this kid, let it be a devil. And so on the night of its birth, it comes rocketing out of her uterus as like a winged beast. And it goes charging up the chimney. That's the real story. You should look it up. It's fun.
I will look it up, definitely. So those are our stories. Now, I think you did such a good job at the beginning of the show of introducing us that I think Trey's Alfred Hitchcock should let us out. So, Trey, I'm going to go back to you. You have to speak us off the air as Alfred Hitchcock. Ready, go.
Yes, very good. Thank you for joining us this evening, ladies and gentlemen. I hope tonight, as you fall asleep by yourself or with your loved ones, you will remember that the darkness is fleeting, but when it's with us, it's deep indeed. Have a good night and enjoy the terrors.